Robin's not coming in this morning, so I know we're almost quorum, so why don't we start? I'd like to introduce Charles Burchill. He's from MCHP. Some of you know a little bit about MCHP, but he's to talk a little bit about it. Okay, Charles, thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you very much. So I got asked to talk a little bit about MCHP, the kind of data we hold, and a little bit about the kinds of research that we do. Just so I can get I'm one of the associate directors at MCHP, and my job really is around red tape and bureaucracy. We wind up using a lot of secondary data, and to use secondary data, you have to get a whole pile of approvals. So, if I'm running a project that involves you as a patient, if you will, I need to get consent from you. Lots of the work that we do doesn't involve getting consent. It involves using data that getting consent might be problematic because sometimes people are dead. Sometimes people are no longer there, you can't find them, and we don't actually interact with people directly. I have a couple of quick questions for you, and since I've told you who I am, I want to know who you are, and how long you've been here.
I'm Habib from Saudi Arabia. I've been here since last May.
The May 2017?
Really for the winter also.
I want you to enjoy the winter. It's beautiful here, lots of things to do. They're going to lie to you about all kinds of things. They're going to lie to you about all kinds of things about the winter, but it's really wonderful here.
Okay, I see.
We're not lying.
That doesn't have my face on it, so it'll just be made up.
My name is Duncan, and I moved here on June 1st of this past year.
Okay, from...
I was in Ireland the past 5 years, but I'm from Vancouver.
I'm James. I'm Manitoba, born and raised.
Perfect.
Yeah.
My name is Laura. I just moved here in June.
Okay.
From Toronto.
I'm Martha, also moved here in June. I'm from Edmonton though, so winter doesn't scare me.
And you're probably reading about the people from Alberta having a nice big snowstorm the other day anyway.
I'm Jessie. I'm from Winnipeg originally. So here.
Going nowhere.
Suzanne, I'm from East Coast in June.
I'm Jonathan, and I'm originally from Winnipeg, and then just moved back after 4 years in Toronto.
And I'm Karen. I'm originally from Toronto and moved here 3 months ago as well.
All right. The first thing that I want to say is you've probably seen this before in lots of other places, but I think it's worth reiterating that we are on treaty lands here, and that we do understand that mistakes have been made, and we're endeavoring to correct those and understand and work together in to deal with those and move forward. So I think you said that you've all seen something about MCHP already? No? Okay. A little bit of stuff in the air.
People using it.
Okay. So we are a research group within the University of Manitoba, and I already mentioned that we use a great deal of this secondary data, and our primary purpose is to do health policy relevant or social policy relevant research. And then lots of other words. If you read really quickly, don't try and type it all down. I'll get somebody to send you this. Administrative data. So I already talked about using the secondary data, but you're up and coming physicians. So administrative data, what does that mean to you? James.
Take the data legally health records and repeat that.
Absolutely, absolutely. He's a smart guy. So there are systems out there that collect information. So some of you will be working on fee-for-service. Some of you will be working on secondary alternate payment modalities, those kinds of things. But in the end, for physicians, you all want to get paid. So being paid is a good thing. Now, is it secondary or primary you're providing good practice?
I don't understand the question.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Sorry, I go off tangents a little bit, but you get paid to get some work done. Primary, I want to get paid. Is it providing good service, good patient care? Is that your primary interest? Or to get paid? You don't have to answer that.
We're really all in.
So, really, to get paid, you have to file some kind of paperwork. The hospitals to actually run the hospital system have to do that. Some of you probably 80% of you get prescriptions at some point. When you go to get a prescription from a retail pharmacy, the pharmacist is being Big Brother and entering some kind of thing behind your back. When you go through school, people collect records number. You have student numbers and you have grades and all those kinds of things. All of those things are used for running the system that they're in. So that's what we call administrative data. So you're exactly right. That data, we wind up getting, where am I here? Yeah. That data we wind up getting here at MCHP, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that because, James, I don't know who you are in my data. You came from Ireland. You came from? Here, okay. That's what I thought. That's why I'm picking on you, because we'll talk about a little bit of process through time. The question that I get sometimes is ownership and trusteeship. So who owns, so if I think about our health data, the data when you go see a physician, the data that's collected on your insurance, your health data, whose is that? Somebody.
Yours.
But yes, absolutely. I assume you mean mine.
Yeah.
Okay, absolutely. It is the patient's information. So it's their information. And that sometimes gets a little, when I'm working with this secondary data, I always have to keep that in mind. I'm not using my data. I'm not using Manitoba Health's data. I'm using your data. So I have to be respectful of that, and I have to understand this is why we've got a pile of approvals. This is why we've got a whole bunch of privacy stuff. I need a show of hands. Speaking of privacy stuff, how many of you have done your FIA orientation? Okay, I figured all of you would have, but I need to ask. So since you've all done your FIA orientation, what's a trustee? Absolutely. People that hold the data in trust for those of you who own the data. So it can be a hospital, it can be a physician, it can be Manitoba Health, it can be the WRHA, it could be the university. So to talk about trustee and ownership and those kinds of things, just as a side issue, personal health information, what is it? What makes it personal health information compared to just my income tax information or my personal information?
It connects you with some access to the healthcare system. Absolutely.
So it takes something that that's identifiable. So your name, it actually could be your name or your address or your health card number, and then it picks up some piece of your health information. So it may not be just your health care, like your healthcare provision, interacting with physicians or interacting with a hospital. It could actually be the university has health information about people as well, those kinds of things. So the data that I work with is by and large de-identified, and there's always this little conversation that I have is about, I work with de-identified data, so Flora, in my data, your name is not there. But I make a distinction between de-identified data and anonymous data. So you're nodding, so you get to answer this.
Well, I imagine there's not too many people who moved from Ireland, who are originally from Vancouver, who are now living in Winnipeg, so I can identify Duncan without knowing his name.
Okay, well that's part of the answer. So de-identified is just that. We've taken those things that are Duncan, if you will, since you brought him up already. We've taken his name and his direct identifiers off of the data, and we've replaced him with an encoded number. Now you're exactly right, that if I know Duncan came here, and let's say he went to the hospital for some reason, broke his leg, not that he's done that, please don't do that to him, broke his leg, I know something about him. So even without broadly getting his address, we might be able to figure him out. We endeavor not to do that, but that would be de-identified as we've taken away the easy way to re-identify you, but it is still possible through various ways to re-identify. Anonymous would be just that. You mentioned I would be surprised at how many people come from Ireland via Vancouver. Other way around, I guess. But the anonymous part would be, I'm going to take all of those Duncans and put them into a big basket and say, these are all the people that came from Europe. So we've got 15,000 people that came from Europe. It's unlikely that I would be able to figure out Duncan from that group until I start piecing it down. So anonymous is, you can't figure it out, and it's not reversible. So de-identified is often reversible. So I said that I deal with coded, your FIN, for example, your 9-digit FIN number. I don't get a real one. I get one that's been encoded, changed, scrambled, whatever you want to call it. But if we get part of a research project and we need to go backwards, we go through all the hoops and get permission to contact you for a consented research study, for example. We can actually go backwards through that. So that may or may not be part of that de-identification process.
Is part of the difference too, though, how you obtain the data to begin with? So if someone's part of the health system and then you use their information, you de-identify them, and you put them into it, whether in a big group like your European study, or a study where you're looking at mini Duncans. But then on the flip side, someone could answer questions or provide information anonymously, in which case you're not necessarily de-identifying them, because you don't necessarily have that information to begin with.
Yep, absolutely. So it's that ability to re-identify. Now, if you're running, so I sit on the REB, and periodically, like every month, we see 10 or so people wanting to do research where they want to do survey work. Usually it's consented survey work, but sometimes it's, we're going to throw this question out to let's say students of the Faculty of Medicine, and they're going to go onto sometimes you wind up with just a little brain lacunae and you can't remember. It's something to do with SurveyMonkey. That's what I'm looking for. Oh boy. So they throw that out and say, we're going to survey everybody that responds, and we're not going to collect their name. We're not going to collect anything about them. We're not going to collect their IP number because SurveyMonkey allows you to not do that. So that becomes anonymous. Now I look at this sometimes and I go, well, you've asked about people that are in 4th year pathology and you want to know something about them, and it's,
You can still narrow it down.
you can narrow it down. So we actually have to be, you are correct, absolutely. If I'm surveying, so how many people did recently the provincial government wanted to know something about your marijuana use? Well, maybe not your marijuana use, but wanted to know about legalization of marijuana. So they put a survey out and asked you a bunch of somewhat leading questions. Did anybody do that? No, if you want to know a bad survey process, go and look at the survey that they did. Because really, you can tell the government wanted some answers, so they asked questions that really said, this is the answer that we want. But that would be an example of completely anonymous. There's 1.5 million people, they're not collecting back-end information, they didn't collect anything that narrows that down a piece, so absolutely correct. The other, did that just go off and come on again? Okay. What's going to happen is on the film there's going to be a little CIA discussion that goes on and nobody will know what happened there. Disclosure and use is another kind of interesting piece. Anybody want to take a crack at the difference between disclosure and use? So think about the physician data that you guys have all filed to get paid and provide good service.
So we're giving information.
Okay, so you're giving information.
Being requested and then giving permission to use.
Okay, that's really close.
I know, it's
No, actually, your first part, if you just stopped, you would have been perfect. So disclosure is when I've got data as a trustee and I'm giving it to you. I don't know what you're going to do with it yet, but I'm giving that data to you, so I'm disclosing from me to you. If I use the data, so for my own purposes, I've got an EMR, I look at that, I provide good service, those kinds of things. Manitoba Health uses it to make sure you get paid. That's a use, so it's all internal. If you're working in the hospital and you're on rounds and you're looking somebody up and you're going through their chart, that's a use, always internally. And then a disclosure is outside of the trustee or outside of the organization. They're usually with a disclosure, I'm going to say there should always be, but usually with a disclosure, there is an agreement about how that data is going to be used. So you're right about that as well. I just wanted those two a little bit separated, so thank you very much. How am I doing? Okay, I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to skip over that. So MCHP has, I'm going to say a bucket of data. Is that okay? It's all been disclosed to us as a research organization, and it covers a whole variety of areas. So there is all of this right-hand side stuff is all health data. Did you go to the hospital? Did you get a prescription? Show up in an emergency department? Those kinds of things. On the left-hand side is kind of social. Is that my 10-minute warning? Thank you. On the left-hand side, it's social data. So social determinants of health. So if you think about somebody that is more likely to go into the hospital, are there drivers of that may not be health related? Okay, you're nodding. Lexa?
Just even like if you have someone come in, say they need antibiotics, and say you're debating, oh, I think they need IV antibiotics, can I do it as an outpatient, or do I have to admit them to hospital? And if someone is homeless or has like harder time traveling back and forth to hospital or whatever, then you're more likely to admit them than someone who has a stable home, easy transportation, you might choose outpatient IV.
Okay, so their socioeconomic status, whether they're homeless, whether they're poor, whether they're not well educated, all of them may have different drivers on their trip to through their healthcare system. Somebody who's not, you're all highly educated, so you know how the system works. Somebody may not actually understand how the system works, so it'd probably be terrible of me to say that well-educated people have an idea of how to game the system. Gaming is not like lottery gaming, but it's understanding I need to go through here, this is how that works, so I can get access or better access. So this is that whole left-hand side. We have information on people that are in social housing, people that are poor, or people that are getting supports in some way. Children that are being looked after. I hate to say it this way, but I'm going to, and then you can throw stuff at me. People that are being looked after by Child and Family Services. Those kinds of things that we can put a little bit of social context on that. Yeah.
I have a question regarding the data that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like you have the data that's saying like this patient is having this social issue and he's having this disease.
Yes.
All of it.
Yes.
They're not usually all in one thing.
Connected to each other, or?
So let me answer that question when I talk about this middle piece. So all of the data that we have, I mentioned that we have an encoded FIN, so we don't have you as a direct identifier or your name as a direct identifier, but we've got a copy of your 9-digit FIN that's been scrambled, so we can't go back easily to figure out who you are. That FIN number has been attached to every single record here. Each of these data sets, so emergency department data, sits in its own little silo until we get permission to use it with another project. So we have the capability to link all of those individuals in the province with all of this data, but only on a project-by-project basis. So if, there's no, most of you said, some of you have been here all your lives. I have an easy button. Does that sound familiar? My wife got me one of those Staples easy buttons for Christmas a couple of years. It sits in my office. People come and ask me questions and I can just push it and go, that was easy. There is relevance to this, that your question is, none of this data is linked on an ongoing basis. It's all linked within a project, and then those project links disappear afterwards. So we don't maintain kind of this big relational database where you can just push the button and get numbers out.
But if you wanted like immunization information as well as someone's nursing home information, as well as what postal code they were from and maybe what school grades they got, you could ask him to press his easy button and give you a new output that is a summary of all of those data sets together. If you had superpowers and a lot of money.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Okay. Can I go on from here? So, you probably can't read, oh, look at this. There. I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna hold it up here. So you probably don't realize this, that I was actually gonna ask you that number over there, but it's there already. So if we look at children, you're all interested in children, I think that's why you're here, right? 14% of the children in Manitoba have some diagnosis for a mental health condition of some kind, whether that's mood and anxiety disorders, so depression, anxiety, those kinds of things, whether that's, so those are very common, whether it's suicidality, whether it's ADHD or other disruptive disorders, or if there is more rare disorders, psychoses, those kinds of things. So there is a lot of, there's a heavy burden of mental health and intellectual disabilities in the province. And as physicians, you're probably going to see that. And that's one of the things that we can do is we can look through the data and go, who are children here? The other very powerful thing is, what's our denominator? So when you do a survey, you have to find out what your denominator is somewhere. Because we've got, I went away, because we've got who's registered with Manitoba Health, and that's virtually everybody in the province. We have a denominator, so who's the population? So we can figure out that that's 14% of the population that have mental health or treatment for mental health. I have to say it that way because so you talked about surveys before, that when we run a survey and we ask either the children or we ask their parents who's got a mental health condition, there's some recall bias and there's some, do I want to tell you this kind of bias? So that's one side. The other side is we've got all this administrative data. So if you've been to see a physician or if you've been into the hospital for one of these conditions, you'll be coded that way. And I hope you're going to ask the question that I was going to ask you.
I just have a question about, like, you're talking about the denominator who's included.
Yeah.
It makes sense that you would have all this data for people who have lived in Manitoba their whole lives.
Yeah.
But for people who just moved in or who, like for myself, who moved away and then moved back, what happens to those missing data and you just get excluded?
No, that's a great question. So sometimes there's some caveats here, but can I give you the simple answer?
Yes.
So when people move to Manitoba, there's a 3-month coverage delay. So once you're covered by Manitoba Health, we get your information. So I'm going to pick on you, that you started off in Manitoba. So since 1970, we've got copies of the Manitoba Health Insurance Registry. So that tells us who's in the province or who was born here. It also tells us when you leave, so you went to BC, is that right?
Ontario.
Drat.
That's okay.
One of you went to Vancouver. So you went to Ontario, and you may or may not have registered yourself with Ontario Health, and you probably did, at which time your Manitoba Health Insurance gets passed over to Ontario. So we see you as leaving the province. We get a cancel code. Jonathan went to, or your scrambled code anyway, went to Ontario. Time goes forward, and you come back. So you come back, you register with Manitoba Health. Manitoba Health goes, this name looks vaguely familiar. They do some magic linkage process, or you tell them, one of the two, hopefully you tell them that I was here before, and they connect you with your FIN that you had before with your current FIN.
Okay.
And now I know that you were here in Manitoba as a child. You went to Ontario for some reason, and then you came back, so you'll have a gap in coverage. So if we want to look at whether you're like a census population, single point in time, we can tell who's here. But if we want to follow a cohort, we can tell when you come and go as well.
Okay. But like immunizations, for example, that I got while in Ontario, what would happen if someone like looked at
They won't,
immunizations
yeah,
for
so they,
people my age to make sure they got all.
yeah, immunizations are kind of an interesting story, but by and large, we wouldn't know what happened to you while you're away.
Okay.
So, yes, that is a black hole. And unfortunately, provinces are these little silos. So if Manitoba wants to share information with Ontario, some of that happens, but not a whole
Show
lot.
your accident information in Congress, but they won't show you.
Pretty much. Some of it does get shared, but pretty much it doesn't. Other questions?
Do you guys have access to, I know federally because First Nations are option health covered that way. How does that play into the information you guys have accessible to you?
So virtually everybody in the province will access care through, I'm going to take people living outside of First Nation communities. So if they're accessing care, they'll show up in the system. If they're accessing care in First Nation communities, often that's being provided by the Northern Medical Unit or through some other contractual agreement, so we capture most of it, not all of it, I will admit, but anything that's provided by the province, and virtually all of the healthcare to First Nations is provided by the province here. There is nursing stations
Well,
and
it's outside the province, it's provided by the province, and everyone have the information.
absolutely. There's some little holes in that. So if we look at access issues in the north, for example, we're sometimes not sure whether this is an access issue or whether it's just a data gap. But pretty much, virtually everything is provided. Identifying First Nations individuals is another story that gets a little bit trickier, and I don't have time to talk about that. I'm going to skip over this. I'm going to skip over this. And I have 2 minutes. I was also asked to tell you a little bit about me. I'm not quite sure why, you could probably ask, but I'm a lifer at the university. I've been working here since 1984, not in healthcare. My background is actually as a field biologist. So I spent quite a few years running around in the bush and canoeing and sleeping in a tent, and that like really cool kind of life to live. Now, I also had to collect data, piles and piles and piles of data, and at the time there was no field computers, so you collect it all on sheets of paper and then you type it all in, and then you do wonderful things with it. Doing that wonderful things, that computer-oriented analysis, database management, statistics, that's why I'm here. And I've been working with the Manitoba Centre for Health Policy since 1992, specifically, and then I worked down here for IST for quite a number of years before that, providing help for them. Oh, what happened to my last slide? Oh well. It's supposed to say, thank you very much. Here's my email address, and here is how to get hold of me if you have more questions. One of the things that I will say right off the bat is doing research for the center, so all of you probably have the opportunity to do residence projects and those kinds of things coming up. Doing your own residence project with MCHP is difficult. I mentioned this approval piece ahead of time, and approval pieces at minimum take about 4 months to get through, sometimes longer. If you've got a residence project that you only work on a little bit and it's over the summer or something like that, you won't be able to start your project and actually get it finished. That's not saying that you can't be involved. So if you've made a connection with a researcher or a FTE that does work here already, they've already got a project ongoing and you want to hook yourself into that, we've had a number of people work through projects in that way.
Do you have a list of people who are not available to research with, but people who do have access to information?
So the easiest thing that I can say is on our website. There's on the left-hand side, I'm just going to tell you this. On the left-hand side, there's a research button. Under that research button, it gives a list of all of the currently active research projects, plus the principal investigators on them. So that gives the research project names, which kind of gives you an idea of the area, and then the PI that's there.
And is that an active list?
That is updated once, there it is. That's updated once a month. So active within the last month.
Well, who does most of the pediatric?
Most of the pediatric work is done by Marnie Brownell or Marriott Chartier. So those two. The clinical pediatric, I might actually look for you because I don't remember, but I'm not going to
If you're
get that
repeating
right.
any insights on the left side of the page under what we can
And Nathan also.
Nathan Nickel. How did I forget Nathan? Yes. I will send the link of all the projects to Celia, if that's okay. Anyway, thank you very much.